I often tell people I used to be a professional introvert. I would dread putting up my hand in class or standing in front of a group of strangers and presenting. During the early part of my career, I often felt my ideas would get suppressed because others would dominate meetings and workshops. But we know that quieter voices in the room are usually the ones with the best ideas. So as a facilitator, how do you create a safe space for everyone to be heard? What if there was a playbook of tools, techniques that you could use to make sure every conversation was inclusive? Well, let me introduce you to Liberating Structures. In this episode, I get to speak to one of the co-authors of the amazing book titled The Surprising Power of Liberating Structures. Keith McCandless operates a global consulting practice focused on strategy development, creative adaptability, and including all voices in shaping next steps. He calls himself a structured improvisationalist. I absolutely love that. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Danda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. So Keith, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited. I've actually waited weeks and weeks for this conversation, and I'm finally glad we made it happen. What superpower would you like to bring to this particular episode?
I think it's the collaborative muscle. Can you work at your highest intelligence as a group every time, every day? So it's not just, it was good. That one project, that one sprint we did it's not that. It's like all the time it's within your reach, as a group to achieve a higher level of awareness, a flow state, in which you're getting things done. Right? That's within your reach. So I call that a collaborative muscle. That's the superpower.
Oh, I love that. And it's much needed, I think, in the world today, because I hear often people saying, not another boring meeting, not another one, or, how are we going to make this conversation engaging? Or as I was many years ago, a professional introvert, I'd be dreading going to these sort of big workshops and feeling like I'm just going to sit there and other people are going to overpower me. So I think there's just so much to unpack. And the great book that you've written, I've got it right here, is you're the co-author of Liberating Structures, as I know it. And it is just an amazing book that's, I think, revolutionized the way we facilitate and have conversations. So I'm really excited to get into that as well. So for anyone that hasn't heard of Liberating Structures, what is it and why should people care?
Yeah. Well, if you want to build that muscle, if you want the superpower, counterintuitively, there's some things you can do. So you said this is video. So you flip the script. Liberating Structures take what we normally would do, which would be a presentation or a brainstorm or a status report, the everyday routine, and say, well, that routine, by the very nature of the things we do now, it excludes people. It dampens their voice, their creativity, and it by nature over controls or under controls. If it's an open discussion, there's not enough control, but most of the time we're over controlling and we do it unwittingly. So liberating structures are patterns that have there's still some structure, there's still some rules in there, but the absolute minimum required to get that group muscle, that collaborative flow, the kind of ability to work at the top of your imagination and intelligence all the time. And so the book details a partner and I were doing in a consulting practice over 10 years. We did 10 years of field work, and we detailed this is what we're doing with the client to try to flip their conventional way of organizing, of the patterns that they use all the time to learn and adapt and all those things. So this flips the script on that. That kind of basic, unwitting, it's just the water we swim. If we were fish, it would be like water around us. It's just, you go into a meeting, somebody's presenting, you do a status report. Once in a while, there's an open discussion, and you don't think about them, but all of them have limits, and they, by their very nature, exclude, stifle, and over control, or under control in some cases. So liberating structures have this balance of the minimum structure that makes it possible to work at your highest absolute imagination and intelligence. They're very practical too. The thing about them, they're, they feel like methods. Like there's a step, even though you're working with messy kind of human interaction. There's a first step and a second step and a third step, and timing. So they're very precise. They generate lots of correct answers, better answers or better solutions. So,
and that's what I love about the book, is it's so practical, and you could almost read the book in any order and just jump in and pick a technique and just deep dive on that one technique. And who would you say sort of makes use of these techniques? I know a lot of Scrum Masters in the Agile world rave about liberating structures, but just in terms of your audience that have come back and told you they're using it, what are some of the diverse types of roles?
Yeah. Well, first, you'd cry if you read my email with joy, because people will say, write and say, they project onto me something that I don't have, but this changed my life in such good ways. And, I'm going to answer your question, but the first surprise we had after we wrote the book, we'd go and we were doing workshops, and we'd stay in a country for a week afterward and just have open office, come in, you get an hour for whatever you want to do. Some people in a big company. And they'd, I have a business background, and my buddy had just retired from co-author had retired from a big company after 35 years and rose to the top. And so but people come in, and what do they want to talk about? Well, their spouse, their kids, their school, sometimes their religion, and then the business issues came up. And we were like, why are you talking to us about these things, these other things? And what the immediate biggest surprise, because we were talking about how do you relate? How do you build that collaborative muscle? Their minds were on business, but they really wanted help with their relationships, all of their relationships in their life. So the people that have found the book to be useful live on 6 continents, that it really spread everywhere. Probably the most extreme settings for me, first of all, people use it for their self-development. They'll take something like the eco-cycle or critical uncertainties, which are business tools to their core, and they apply them to their personal life. So that's one group, just individuals. Another group that has surprised me quite a bit are religious groups. We'll use it in a synagogue for talking together about what's important. Classrooms taken off equally as strong as within Agile and Scrum inside classrooms. Not all professors professors like to be expert, sage on the stage, not guide on the side. This is more you're guiding on the side. Another big group are NGOs, so international NGOs working on things like civility and peace in the world or food distribution. I've worked in the financial sector. I've worked for NASA, the scientific organization. It goes on and on, and I don't know why I'm leaving out. I'm sure I'm leaving out a million different kinds of groups. Work with kids a lot. Really young kid. Sounds like is it your daughter? Yeah. That's the place to start, because the way that the routines that we use to work with others are pretty well entrenched. They're just built in. But you get someone between 8 and 15 or 16, and they're ready. Liberating structures are like music to them. They just hear it and they do it. And I know that I worked at this early on after we wrote the book, went to Denmark, and there's a school called Chaos Pilot. Have you ever heard of it? It's really interesting. Sort of socially conscious, entrepreneurial leadership, those things all in one. And it's that they have a global students, but we planned a week-long workshop with them, and 2 students were on my design. I always design with a design group made up of people from the organization. So we had 2 students. We're about 5 minutes into a week-long set of sessions, and the 2 young women kind of go, Keith, we've got this, and they have this little emotion with their fingers, like, you can go over here. They read the material. We talked about it. They were just ready to go. They didn't need me. And I was thrilled. That was the first. I wasn't sure that had happened, but it did happen. And the absence of all of the years of training, let's say, or even the typical training, even if it's facilitation training, tends to be over controlling, and doesn't do the same thing that the liberating structures do, which is distribute control. That's the core thing. How do you productively distribute control away from yourself or the expert or the formal hierarchical structure, which is going to be there, but it doesn't help you work at the top of your intelligence and imagination. That's it. So the incredibly wide group of people have found the work useful and applied it to their local setting in a very unique, individualized pattern. So I'm writing a second book. I didn't tell you that, but it's 10 years after we published the first one. We're trying to just even hint at the incredible variety of applications in the world, across the world, in these different domains. So it's exciting. Yeah. It's hard to do. Yeah, it's hard to do.
You got me super excited. It's like, when a band comes out with a hit record, and then, the real test is the second album, and that's a lot of pressure. So I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. And from what you're saying, if I just play that back in my own words, it sounds like for many years, leaders and, people who are in that position of authority have almost led things and assumed that they are the expert in the room. However, what you've done with the book is provided a voice for the other people in the room and actually flip that on its head to say, well, how do we bring those great ideas out of people? Would that be correct in terms of my thinking?
Definitely that. Autopilot, what we all learned, was let me be polite here for a second, and then I won't be. But that they just don't know. They just don't know. We've got to bring in an expert, and then develop a set of things which are best practices. And then we have to get buy-in on those practices that were developed far away from where the work is being done, or where the user is, or where the student is, or the patient is, or the citizen is. We'll do that over here. And it's as if no one in the world got educated, and there aren't people who learn something as they're doing the work. That's just how it is. We have to do that. And so scale, you always have to have this thing, the ideas come from above and disseminate down. Well, just listen to that. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, but we do it over and over and over again. And it's nonsense because there's an alternative. You can still get great results. It's not, what I want to is expand on what you said. So as a regular, it's not like let's go to the front and get some ideas and then bring them up and change them around. No, we're suggesting the control is at the local level. Much more is shaped in the moment by the people doing the work. And the center or the top really serves the needs of the local groups. Right? So the part of the flip is even at the level of who's supporting who here and what role, what are the roles. So in our work, the purpose and the principles play a huge deal. So how do you get fidelity? Let's say, how do you get an organization that's recognizable as one organization when all of these local pieces are doing their own thing? Well, you have to have a really firm grasp on the principles and the purpose of the work, whatever it may be. And then that's enough to hold it, to have fidelity, have some core essence the same wherever it is that whatever local work is being done. And we tend to neglect those things. Our principles in most organizations are kind of throwaways. The visions all sound like the same thing. It's not really part of the fabric. So liberating structures are these set of methods, but they're interrelated that distribute control productively. And there's more exactly what you said. And that's just more about it. Why it's kind of hard and why it's more of a flip on everything. And it's going to take a while for people to, what's good is you can pick up any method and you can just see how smart and intense and incredibly imaginative any group is. In 5 minutes, you start to get that group flow where they're focused on the topic at hand. They lose track of time. Could we have more time to do the work together? They're coming up with lots of solutions to a really complex challenge, something that's an insurmountable opportunity. They're willing to take it on. Like, can we do that? And yeah. And so you get immediate results with even just using one of the structures. And, so I'm getting overexcited, clearly, but that's kind of how it works, that you gain, part of the collaborative muscle is gaining confidence in each other. And the leaders, the formal leaders with authority, gain confidence that the local folks have the solutions and can enact them. And there's no reason to use, expert can be part of that, but you don't rely on them exclusively. And you don't have to do buy-in. They own the idea because they generate those solutions. And slowly but surely, everybody gained confidence in themselves together. So that's a pretty huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't do that justice with my 2-second summary of what I sort of suggest the book's helping us with. And thank you for that. And Keith, I love hearing people's stories and journeys of how they came up with some of the ideas, even some of the challenges along the way. So I guess the first question I had on that was, Do you remember at what point you decided to write the book? Like, was there a moment that really triggered this thought that, hey, we've got to get this out into the world? And what happened there?
Well, Henry, co-author, and I met because of an interest in complexity science. So these were physicists and mathematicians and physiologists who all were studying nonlinear dynamics and all sorts of very heady things. And we're in an international learning group. And Henry and I and a few other people were like, oh, we want to apply this to organization. And lots of these folks were in universities and they just laughed out loud pretty much. It was like, no, that wouldn't work. The same sort of ideas, the dynamics of complex systems where something organizes itself without central control, for example, like it's self-organizing. That wouldn't, no. And so Henry and I just kind of went after it for 10 years in the field. So rather than one moment, we skipped around to different countries. We're trying out different structures, which didn't have names really at the time. But something spectacular would happen. It was in a large health system in the United States. And we're doing a simulated kind of fishbowl activity where there was a simulated board meeting with 100 people around the outside. Partway through there, we thought it was going terribly. It was like, this is the worst board meeting ever. There's no decisions, no thoughtful collaboration, nothing. But partway through, the CEO of this incredible guy threw his hands up, total excitement. Everything that's the best discussion we've ever had. Everything we just decided, final. That's what we're going to do. And Henry and I looked at each other like, what just happened? We really didn't understand, and weren't able to discern what happens for the client there. And, that was a moment in which kind of went, there's more power here than we know, than we see, even though we engineered something in that room, a way of interacting with a small group in the center and a bunch of people around the outside and some things back and forth. That was so different and so much better. And so that was the first let's get more specific about what we did, because we did things, but we didn't know what they were. And so that built over 10 years in which we had a little workbook in Portuguese and one in Spanish and then French. And, we were all over the place and built a repertoire one by one, where it got up to 33. Well, it wasn't even 33. And people kept, along the way, people would say, where's your book? Why don't you have it? And, we just needed to be shamed into writing a book. Neither of us thought of ourselves as writers, but the work overtook us, right? The success with the work made us want to write it down more precisely for others. And when we published, we weren't at all sure there was anything in there that anyone could. We knew that if people participated in a workshop, they'd copy what we did, right? They would see what we did and they could easily copy it. So we went, okay, well then maybe a book. We found somebody to help us write, an editor, and we did it. And that was a good move, but we were surprised again, like people coming to the office and asking about their families or how can we use this for things here. Agile, some of the first people that popped up were people in Germany who were Scrum coaches or advised Scrum coaches, and the Liberators. I don't know if you know Barry and Christian, but they had another company with a different name. They experienced the liberating structures and then said, well, we're the liberators. It changed the way they even named themselves. And so that happened globally after the book, and took 10 years since we published to get me to a place where I was willing to try to write a second book. But the inspiration, it wasn't a ta-da, I see the light. It was a whole bunch of, what just happened? And can we be, if that was powerful for people in this organization, let's be precise as we can be about how anyone could do that anywhere, every day. Sorry, long answer.
No, amazing. And I think often that's how things end up, isn't it? When you are doing something great and others are getting value from it, and all of a sudden they're almost demanding it from you, and then it's an easy step, rather than thinking about what the world needs and then trying to come up with those ideas can be really, really difficult.
I think that's it. And reluctant we were to write. It's hard. It's hard to do.
Yeah. And Keith, in terms of then the liberating structures themselves, I'd love to do a bit of a deep dive on some of them. Obviously, there's way too many for us to cover on this episode, but could we delve into a few of them and the ones that you particularly feel are, super useful for people and easy for them to sort of start to pick up and use?
Well, why don't we do one that's every day, can't resist, and then one that's a little bit really, I wouldn't do it as you get started if you haven't used them already. And they fit together in one ways or another. Every liberating structure is a modular. What that means, you can use it separately or string it together in over some period of time. Let's say you're doing a sprint for a week. You could easily use repetitions, but there could easily be 15 or 20 different liberating structures used in a logical, productive sequence in which each one feeds the next. But almost any time, rather than brainstorming or a presentation or any of the conventional things, 1, 2, 4, all. It's a liberating structure. And the first thing it does is radical, and no one does it. Let's take 1 minute for you to think about the suggestions you have, the ideas for next steps, or what do you even think the thing is that we're trying to work on? Pick one of those three and say, now you have 1 minute to think about that just by yourself. Jot something down. Total silence. That's all that anyone does, whether they don't like, a lot of people don't like a minute of silence, but we're going to do it. And suddenly all the introverts are in, all the, lots of things can happen there. And then immediately following is 2 minutes. And this works equally well online or face to face. And in the role I'm hosting, I'm more like a dinner party host than a facilitator. But now 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, find somebody near you or around you that you don't work with all the time. Spend 2 minutes just sharing what you've learned. Don't try to what you've written, what you thought. Don't try to jump to a conclusion. Just savor the differences in what you've come up with. And the end of 2 minutes, each pair, find a 4, find another pair, and you're going to be in 4 for 4 minutes. And in that group of 4, again, share the ideas you've developed. There's no need. You aren't trying to come up with one that smushes them together, but rather all the diversity and there might be something that pops into view there. And then we're going to do an all. After that 1 minute, the 2 minute, group of 4 minutes, we'll do an all for 5 minutes. And in that all, any group that came up with something so good, so interesting that popped into view that everyone should hear. This is not a report out where everybody lists all their trivia, detritus, whatever it has. It's not like everybody has to report out something. It's like, well, did your group come up with something so interesting, so sharp that everyone else in the room should hear it? What is that? And you gather that. It could be written in chat. It could be verbal. Somebody could be writing it down. And then you go, okay, if you're hosting, that's great. Is that as deep or as high, as elevated, as illuminating as we can go? Should we spend another 12 minutes doing one more round based on what we see there? Could we do, you just took 12 minutes to do a 1, 2, 4 all or about that. Do you want to do one deeper? 1, 2, 4 all? So it's modular, and that's all that it is, right? That's this basic. You got to do timing. So the minimum specifications to get that intelligence out are group 1 person, and then 2 people, and then 4. And these are rules. There's no like kind of do that. No, these are these are minimum rules. So they're rules. They're not guideline. And the timing, obviously, the group size, the timing, the invitation, and this is the DNA of every liberating structure. They all have these elements. The invitation, what were your ideas for this challenge? And the sequence. And it's not only is it a good thing to do just to anytime you're doing something, if you're doing something more complex, the next one I want to talk about, I want your feedback to this, but let's say you're doing something like critical uncertainties. What's critical to your future, and you're uncertain about how it'll play out, right? What's critical and could put you out of business, but man, you can't tell what direction it's going. And so that's a pretty heavy activity. And so as you walk through that activity, you do a 1, 2, 4 all. And there you're collecting, and making sense out of, what the group is coming up with for what's both critical and uncertain. And so I'm trying to describe the modular nature of the things is they can be pulled in and pulled out. So, is that what you had in mind? That's the 1. The 1, 2, 4 all is the simplest of all.
Yeah, I was going to say that is one of my favorites, and I use that so often. It's got to be my go-to one. And a quick question on that. You mentioned there are certain rules and, getting people to do it individually, then pairing up, etc. What about the timings? So would you say when you're doing things individually, 1 minute is a good guide to go with, or is that the number that you have to go with? Like, what would you say in terms of those times? Because a lot of people might think 60 seconds is nothing. Like that's a very short amount of time. What could I possibly get out that's going to be super creative?
I know there's a lot of pushback on it. Here's the reason why I want everyone to start with those particular timings. It's not, I'm torturing you. I'm not, it's a very specific set of reasons. When you have that short amount of time, 3 things are going on. One is it's provocative. It's like you don't know what you're going to say. It creates some confusiasm. Like, is this it? Is not it? And as a result, there are more diversity of thought shared. And you can't, the normal bias that you have, like past will predict the future, or everything I see confirms what I already know. All of that stuff gets jumbled a bit if you only have a minute and then 2 minutes in a pair. And the second thing is really we want a lot of voices to be heard. So because you're only with that person for 60 seconds, then you're going to be with another pair in a bit, and you're going to hear the interaction. The pattern of interaction is more important than the content in any one step. And then the third thing is the recombination. So because you have this diverse set of things, most good ideas are recombinant, or take those, they get swirled around and something new pops into being that wasn't there before. Right? So the goal here is always three things. Connect more. You're going to get a deeper connection with more people. You are going to understand the context, the different ways in which people see the same challenge. You're going to get just like, what? This is way more than I thought it was. Different usually is the response. And then the third thing is a really new option pops into view. So that didn't appear prior to this. That's the reason why the timing is so bad. And I strongly recommend that you start with those steps. And then if you can't, for any reason, do them. And it could be there could be lots of different reasons for not being able to do it that quickly. But I'd like everyone to try to start. So each structure is written. So here's a place we want you to start. We get it that everybody, and we want this desperately everyone to creatively adapt once they have experience with it, because there's lots of good things you can do. But start with the crazy fast timing that we suggest. Was that reasonable, what I just said?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was probably, just playing devil's advocate there, but I certainly find that when we do put some time pressure on people, we tend to surprise ourselves, I think. And there's an activity I sometimes run, which is 30 circles. And you may have come across that, where if you want to get people really creative, give them a minute, draw a bunch of circles and ask them just to turn them into anything they want and draw whatever they can. And it's amazing how, when you're given lots of time, you come up with very few ideas, but actually in that moment, people get so creative and they start thinking outside the box, start joining circles together, creating glasses and all sorts of things. And other people look at it and go, well, I didn't know you could join up circles. And you're like, there were no rules. And these people have just gone super creative. So it's amazing, I think, what you see people doing in that environment.
Well, every invitation to a structure is both precise and ambiguous. So what I mean, the precision is now we know what challenge we're talking about, what insurmountable opportunity, the focus of everybody in the room is on this thing. Like, we've got to develop this new feature or whatever it might be. And then the ambiguity is, well, it turns out there's lots of solutions, lots of good answers for many complex challenges. There's no optimal answer. Right? We want to think there's always an optimal answer, but if you really have a complex thing, wow, you want as many good answers, right answers that fit a local context as you can possibly get. So don't start narrowing. That's silly. If you've got a real thing you're trying to solve, a real, an entangled thing. Yeah. So do you want to talk about one more? A bigger structure? Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, please.
Lots of choices. Are there any that you've experienced that you'd want to hear me blather about?
I'd just love to go with your favorite, to be honest. What's one of your babies that you love out of that group?
I have a new co-author for the book, and there's a bunch of icons. And I just look at the icon and I know what it is, because I've been doing it forever, but it's kind of like that. So you're going to make me go to Critical Uncertainties. And it's partly because of the uncertainties in the United States right now, and just the uncertainties that authoritarian leaders bring, particularly ones that may have just been elected in the United States. You just know there's going to be surprises. And there's things that are so critical uncertainties. I first learned about that idea doing scenario planning way back when I worked at a healthcare think tank in San Francisco. And there was a week-long process to do scenario planning. Well, a very productive 90 minutes can do similar things if you use critical uncertainties, the liberating structure called that. So you think about what's critical and uncertain in your environment. You pick the top two things. And I'm going to use an example that's just out of the way a little bit, but this was a classroom of college students, and they did meaningful work. I don't know. So one of the uncertainties, I don't know whether I'll be able to get meaningful work or I'll just be doing like flipping burgers. Is there meaningful work in my future, or is it meaningless work? And then secondarily, will I be making enough money? Do I have to keep living at home, or can I go find my own place? They didn't know. It was critical and uncertain for them whether post college, like what would their situation be? So there was a future where they're doing meaningless work and they're still at home. Oh my God. They were like, there's always a dark one. And they're putting this together in a really short period of time. Like they figure out what it is, what the critical uncertainties are. And then there's I have meaningful work. Well, and I have money I can live anywhere I want. So there's 4 plausible futures. And this can work at any scale for any human being or any group, any individual person or group as a whole. And so with those 4 plausible futures, you start to think about, well, what's my strategy to succeed as a person or as a company within any of them? So one by one, you divide the group. So for I'm at home and I have meaningless work. How do I maintain? It's my artwork. It's like your daughter's suggestion to you. I'm going to focus on my artwork. Work isn't going to do anything for me and I won't have money. So all I need is paint and a brush. Right? That's the strategy. I have meaningful work. On the other end would be meaningful work and I have money. As I'm going to find the master. I'm going to do the work and be good at it, but I'm also going to get some training. I'm going to go to France and learn how to paint from a master, whatever it may be. That's a strategy, like follow the guru. And so the students are able to think about their future, not knowing what it is, but being prepared for whatever happens, whatever presents itself. And through that activity, it's easier to see it for an individual young person, like they really don't know, but suddenly they have a set of strategies. They aren't attached to one vision of the future that's rosy and unrealistic. And they've had a chance to talk with their student colleagues about what it means to succeed in each of those separate futures. So there's steps in critical uncertainties. And after each step, like just getting the 2 uncertainties, like, will I have meaningful work or not? Or, will I have money to move out or not? After you do that step, it's a good idea to just do a 1, 2, 4 roll in between before you start to think about strategy. What am I going to do in all those 4 features? Take stock of what do those 2 things really mean for me in the 1, 2, 4 roll? And then once you have some strategies, take a minute and, of those strategies we saw that were generated by the whole group, which ones, again, make a difference for me? And again, you talk about it, a 1, 2, 4 roll, and then you get into, what are your first steps? what are you going to do about, given all of those steps in different plausible futures, where are you going to focus your next step? And so that's an example of a bigger, more complicated liberating structure, critical uncertainties, mixed with an everyday, simple 12, 15-minute 1, 2, 4 all activity.
What I love about that is you're bringing common challenges to the whole group, and they're all having to really think this through. And then we're still giving individuals that time to think about the challenges and the solutions on their own. And again, how many times do we see when we're in a work context and the facilitator will say, we've got these challenges, I want you all to just brainstorm loads of ideas. And it's always like they expect you to turn on a switch, don't they? Just to figure things out and hopefully give you lots of really good ideas. And it almost sort of sieves out some of the noise, because as you're going through that 1, 2, 4 all process, I mean, I almost picture it as a bit of a funnel where we're going to have lots of ideas. Some of them are going to be good, others aren't. And we're sieving them as we're going down that sort of funnel.
Well, and they're all good. Just I want to hold for a second. I was doing, when we were first trying to, do we have something that's real with liberating structures? When Henry and I were working, we decided to focus on preventing the spread of superbugs in hospitals. So here we are. I have no business being in an ICU or in the middle of a hospital, but we're in a group, we're talking, doing an activity called Discovery and Action Dialogue. And we'll generate all these ideas. How do you prevent the spread of the superbug? And one of the participants says, well, cedar oil works, it'll prevent it, everything moves away. And this is the methicillin resistant Staph aureus. It's highly unlikely, even laughable, in cedar oil. I'm sure if you put it, it would love cedar oil, no problem. But in the context of that, what the best response was, and I was training a host to do these kinds of changes, said, well, yeah, how would we know that idea would work? And then somebody said else in the group, well, let's put cedar oil and the bacteria in a petri dish and see if it works. Now, nobody actually needed to do that, but the idea was respected, right? It sat there for a little while and I had to suppress a laugh. I did, I don't think I showed that I thought, that wasn't a good idea, because I did learn a little bit about the scientific basis for the bug as we were doing the work. But the person's idea was respected. It was thought about, and all of them worked together. And it didn't need to be put in a petri dish, but it was respected. And so that momentum, that doesn't happen when you do a brainstorm and you're a whole big list of ideas. That momentum is my ideas, my ideas are going to be mixed with others, and we're going to own whatever the solutions are, and they're going to be generated right here. And we're even going to measure whether they're working or not as we go. That's the beauty of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we're fast approaching time as well, because the time has just flown by. Are you able to give us a sneak peek of some of the ideas in the new book that you're coming up with, or anything you can share about which direction you're going in?
Well, two of the bigger things. One is everything is, during the pandemic, the entire repertoire was translated to online. So, save one of the structures called 2510 crowdsourcing. In the book, we update all of them, share how do you do them online. And we're platform agnostic. It's just like, here's what you need to do to mix the grooves, to do the timing, and it's built into the structure, each structure itself. So that's one. We introduced 10 new structures that have been out there and field tested and are reliably surprising, liberating structures. And there's quite a range there. I'm going to mention two real briefly. One called Spiral Journal, which just gives you a chance to calmly reflect before you jump into the work ahead. Right? We're so, and in particular during the pandemic, all the online meetings were a circus for a lot of people. And so how do you prepare and get into the space? It's called Spiral Journal to Quiet Activity. It's wonderful. A one on the absolute other end is called Strategy Not Working. So how would you string together a whole set of liberating structures to together as a large group develop strategy for your organization or your group? And so those 10, there's also one more called that we found the need for, and I used in a variety of consulting organizations, called grief walking, where you tap the people around you to get support through a loss or a transition. Could be any kind of thing. And each person has a chance to share a loss and get support. And that's one of the ones where every time I gulp a little bit, like, can I do this? Is it going to work? But everything in these 10 that we're developing are, like I said, surprising what they can do and reliable. And they're surprising both because you don't know exactly what the outcomes will be, but they help a group work at their highest level, highest imagination, highest supportive qualities, but also highest intelligence together. So but there's more in the book. It's not done yet. We're about halfway through. Think kind thoughts about me, please. To get through, send me a little "Go Keith, go" every once in a while on email. That would be helpful. Yeah.
Oh, no problem, Keith. I just love the fact that you're sort of on this journey again, and can't wait for it to come out. You got me intrigued though, Keith, because like, what's your thought process when you come up with a new structure? Could you share a little bit about that in terms of, do you have a pattern that you work to? Because we talk about structures, and then do you apply that thinking to your own ideas?
Each one is different. A bunch of the new ones came from the larger global community. Somebody had an idea, they developed it, it's been worked around. For those in particular, we just were more specific about the invitation, the timing, the steps, some things we're doing in the book would help a new user get the rules straight, right? So that's one kind of thing. Another is just a deep social need has been neglected. So this getting ready for the work ahead, spending a moment to think, not just the 1 minute, but you need more for certain situation. And so that was the Spiral Journal was just a need, and it got expressed first for students coming into classrooms. They just weren't ready to learn, right? They needed more time to get deeper into themselves and to hear themselves, not just to be heard, but hear it yourself. Where are you? The strategy, let me think about one other one. There's no one way to do it. Sometimes there's there's a really exciting idea. So one of them is called Talking with Pixies. Do you know what a pixie is? It's the little thing that whispers in your ear. And so this a body of work called Immunity to Change, kind of popular. And the core idea there is you're not resisting change. You're just, most of the time, you've made commitments to people and ideas, and you haven't reviewed those you haven't reviewed them lately. And some of them, those attraction or the commitment you've made to those things, you could let that go. And then there'd be room for bringing something new in. And so that idea that we don't resist change, but we've made so many commitments and haven't reviewed them. So there's a committee in your head that's constantly reviewing those commitments. And here with the Pixies, we made a seriously fun, playful way to address that. And so there's some roles to be played, and there's literally two people on either side of you who are your pixies. And you talk about a crossroads that you're facing. And there's a brief interview in which your commitments to various things get addressed. You face some things, and then your pixies start chattering in either ear with you just closing your eyes. And the pixies, one of the pixies is, no, maintain all your commitments. You know, your commitments are commitments. They're just rock solid. You need to stay with those truths. And the other ear is the innovator, turn it upside down. Like, no, that doesn't matter anymore. Let go of that. That's silly. You know, there's plenty of, look at all the things you can do to gain from if you just let some of those commitments go. And those pixies work you a really short period of time because it's quite overwhelming. But it gives you the opportunity to make a bigger leap from where you are through a transition of some sort or a crossroads. The committee in your head, out of your head, and gets shared by this group you're with, including these two pixies. So that one got inspired by an interesting theory. And some come from that. Some come directly from someone in the field that's practicing some interesting thing. But many of them are like, there's a real need for this that wasn't addressed in the first 33 that we wrote down.
If someone said at the start of this episode, I'll be speaking to you about pixies, I would not have believed them. But there we go. We've weaved in pixies. I love that. And Keith, a question I normally finish off on, and I didn't tell you this, so you've got no warning of this question, is I often ask my guests, if I could give you any superpower to abolish something in the world of work, so eliminate it, we'll only do it for 24 hours because just in case it goes wrong, we'll run an experiment. What would that be for you? And it could be something that really knocks you about the world of work.
There's plenty. The thing that always, it's the presumption that if you have a formal leadership position, that you know better. The lack of humility. And then, more humility, more, it's not just empathy, but appreciate what everyone else has to bring. And when I see that, and I see that expressed through these corporate slogans and like, here's what we're going to do, or even a vision it lacks humility so completely. Like, I've got this thing, this future is the one. Come on now. Stop that. Please stop that. Does that make sense? That's a pretty, it could be viewed as a vague wish, but that's the one I want less the overconfidence.
Yeah. I mean, would that tie into ego? Like reducing people's ego and leaving it at the door?
You can still have ego, but just appreciate what's much more of what's around you, and the humility to know that there's a lot to be gained from what you already know. I don't want to diminish anybody's confidence, but be open to what everybody else can add. And I just know when I'm with the bosses, and sometimes I'm a little like a pixie. I am. And we'll have just done an eco-cycle or a critical uncertainty, and I'll go up to the boss. It's better if the direct reports are there, so vice presidents or whoever it is, they're there. And I go, well, you guys, of course, in these results that we just got, you knew that, right? It's like, no, this is new. And they can't, we just smile and I let it go. When I have my moment of like, this group just showed you, I hope you saw, I I hope you can see what was added by including all these people. I hope you can see that. And that they have a muscle. We're building a muscle together. And there it is. They flexed it. Did you notice? That's it. Thanks for this. I like your first question and your last question. Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you, Keith. And so you can keep your ego, folks, but your humility needs to increase. And we're going to do that for 24 hours and see how it goes. And if people want to get in touch with you or follow the great work that you're doing, where can they find you? And are there any other shout outs you'd like to make before we wrap up?
Yeah, the ways to go are, there's an app, a Liberating Structures app. It's available for any kind of funds you have. There's a website you'll find if you just type in Liberating Structures. I'm pretty available, Keith, at liberatingstructures.com. You can write me a note or encouragement for the book, please. And over the next 9 months, there'll be more about the second book, and my co-author, Nancy White, shout out to her. We're because there's this global community, what we're generating, we want to work with all the people who have already loved Liberating Structures to be sure it's produced in a form they can use it immediately. So we're going to be reaching out, and there'll be plenty that you can see about the book before it's published. Yeah. I think there's 2 books. What we're thinking about now is 2 books. One on design or deeper cuts. If the first one is the previous album remastered, the second one is deeper cut. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, no, you're welcome, Keith. And thank you so much for sharing that. And there you go, folks. You've heard it here. You're getting a further couple of installments, which I can't wait. And I think it's much needed. So, Keith, I just want to thank you for your time and just sharing all your insights as well, because, it's great reading the book, but when you hear the stories behind the book and just some of that additional thinking, it really brings it to life even further. So really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's great fun. Great fun. Nice to get to know you a little.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.